A new episode of Fractured Reality, hosted by yours truly, is available now over at Erie.fm, but it's only for premium members. The episode features encounters with real-life glitches in our world, specifically a glitch where a pilot is told there is someone on board who simply does not exist. Catch the disappearing person at 35,000 feet on Erie.fm right now, members only. Sign up to be a premium member for tons of extra stories only for my supporters. Or just head over to listen to all your favorite EerieCast shows in one cozy place. We're taking creepypasta submissions right now for a contest until the end of May. First prize gets $1,000, second and third get $300. To participate, go to Erie.fm/contest, make sure you have an account and log in, and send us your best original and scariest creepypasta. Looking forward to it. What makes deer so unnerving? I think it's their eyes. Big, dark, staring eyes that see beyond what they look at. It forces you to feel as if you're prey along with them. This story sent to me by Simply Ryan, called The Deer in My Backyard, is a disturbing and strange tale. In it, a man discovers his father's new obsession with taxidermied deer, which he sets up outside in the yard. But there's a very good reason they face away from his father's house. Something else is out there, and it wants in. My father took up taxidermy when I was about 10. He had been a hunter since he was a kid. He loved going out alone before dawn and coming back at mid-morning with a deer on the front of his truck and a thermos of coffee that had gone cold by then, which he'd never finished. He started doing his own shoulder mounts to save the cost of paying the taxidermist in town, and the first few were, well, I'll just say rough. The eyes always looked demonic. That's the way I'd put it, and he hated it when I said that. The ears also were lopsided. But he kept at it. By the time I was a teenager, he was doing other people's deer too, for $50 a head, and he was reasonably good at it. I mean, he never made his living off of it, but he had a sideline for years. He stopped hunting about 18 months before any of what I'm going to tell you. He didn't say why, never did. I asked him on the phone one Sunday, and the most I could get him to say was he got tired of it. I asked him a couple of weeks later, and he said the same thing. So I just didn't ask anymore. He was 68 by then. I figured he had earned the right to be tired of anything he wanted to be tired of. When I was a kid, I spent hours in the garage with him while he worked. I would sit on a stool in the corner and watch him and ask him questions about what he was doing. Sometimes so many questions he would get a little bit irritated. But most of the time, he was game. He would tell me about which side of the hide to flesh first, and how to set the ear butts, and what the difference was between a tanning agent or a preservative. He let me handle the fleshing knife when I was 11, and he let me attempt my first mount when I was 14, a squirrel I'd killed with my BB gun. It wasn't very good. A cousin of mine called it Frankenstein's squirrel, but my dad told me I would get better at it if I kept at it. I didn't keep at it. By the time I was 16, I'd moved on to cars, music, and of course, girls. So the garage was his alone again. He never seemed to mind too much. He just kept doing his work. I'm his only son. I have a sister who lives in San Diego and has not been back to see mom or dad in 4 years. My wife and I live about 90 minutes from the place I grew up, in a small house I bought before we got married. My wife does clerical work. I work in motor vehicle parts. We have 2 boys, who I'll call C and E. C is 11 and Eli is 7. I hadn't been back to my dad's house in about a year when my mom fell. She had been carrying laundry up from the basement. She missed the second step from the top, and she came down on her left hip on the landing. Dad heard her fall and ran to her. Turned out her hip was broken in 2 places. They had her in surgery that night. 3 days in the hospital. The orthopedic surgeon told her she would need 6 to 12 weeks of careful recovery, and she would not be able to use stairs or carry anything heavier than a coffee cup, and she would need somebody around for the first month or so. Now, Dad was capable of helping her with most of it, but he was 69 and had his own bad knee. Truth was, he wasn't going to be able to bend her socks on for her or get her in and out of the tub, and that's just a couple of basic things. My wife and I discussed it heavily one night. She worked for the school system and had the summer off. The boys had summer break too. I had some vacation banked and FMLA available, so we agreed to go up for 3 weeks. After that, we convinced my sister to fly out from San Diego for a week. After that, we would have to figure out home care if Mom still needed it. The house had 2 spare bedrooms. It would work. It wouldn't be fun, but it would work. I called Dad the next morning to tell him we were coming. He said good and that he appreciated it, and that he'd see us Friday. Now, the two of us had been having phone calls every 2 or 3 weeks for the past year, and he never really talked about much, so I wasn't really prepared for what I saw when I got there. My dad's house is at the end of a gravel road 3 miles off the state highway. The road climbs the side of a low ridge and crosses a creek twice on a 1-lane bridge. The trees on both sides are mostly maple and hickory, with some white pine mixed in. There are 4 houses on the road, including my dad's. He has 37 acres at the end of it, most of it woods, with a clearing of about 4 acres where the house and the barn and the outbuildings are. The driveway turns off the gravel road and runs up an incline for about 100 yards, which goes through hardwood trees, then opens up into a clearing. I saw the first deer where the driveway opens up. It was a 6-point buck, standing about 10 feet to the right of the driveway, on the edge of the lawn. Its eyes were glass. Its fur was matted, and a piece was missing from its left shoulder. It faced away from the house, looking out towards the woods. I slowed the truck. "What is that?" my wife said. "God, that's one of my dad's mounts." "But why is it in the yard?" she wondered. I didn't have an answer. I drove a little further. There was another one to the left of the driveway. This one was a smaller doe with 1 ear missing. Past that was another buck, in the middle of the yard near the well house. Then another. As we came up to where the driveway fully opened in front of the house, I could see the whole clearing. There were mounted deer everywhere. They were placed at intervals around the perimeter of the clearing, all of them facing outward toward the woods. I counted them as I drove. There were 12 in the front clearing alone, with more visible at the corners of the house, going around to the back. The boys were quiet in the back seat. I looked at my wife, and my wife looked back at me like, what is going on? We saw my dad sitting on the front porch. He was in his rocking chair. He'd had that thing for 30 years, a green metal rocker that had been painted 3 times. He had his hands folded in his lap. He was wearing overalls and a John Deere hat. He had his rifle leaned up against the wall behind him, in the corner between the screen door and the porch post. I parked and got out. The boys got out happily behind me, ready to stretch their legs. My wife got out and went around to the back of the truck. "Hey, Dad," I said to him. "Son?" He sounded a little hoarse. He stood up from the rocker. He came down the steps slowly, meeting me at the front of the truck. He gave me a big hug. Then he hugged the boys one at a time, then my wife. He turned around to the door. "Come on in. Your mother's been waiting for you." It was funny at the time, but he didn't say anything about the deer. I guess to him it was just decor. We unloaded the truck. I took the bags up to the spare bedrooms. That house had not changed in the year since I'd last seen it. The rugs were in the same places, photos in the same places, and the same photos. The kitchen smelled like that same brand of dish soap I grew up with. We found my dear old mother in the dining room, which had been converted into a sick room. There was a hospital bed where the table used to be, and there was a walker beside the bed. Her left leg was in a long brace that went from her hip to her ankle. She was thinner than the last time I'd seen her. Her hair had gone wider at the part. She had her glasses on and she was sitting up, with 3 pillows propping her up. She was reading a Joyce Carol Oates paperback. "Hey, Mom, you doing okay?"
Just get over here."
I leaned down and she put her arms around my neck and held on for a while. The boys came in behind me. She got C's face between her hands and then E's. She held my wife's hand after that.
"Oh, I'm terribly sorry about all this fuss," she said.
"Oh, don't be." I gave her a smile, letting her know it was all right.
"I am sorry, though."
"Mom, stop. If you don't have family, who do you have?" I repeated the phrase she had told me when I was a kid. Thing is, she didn't mention the deer either. I asked her how she was feeling exactly. She told me about the surgery and the rehab schedule and the medications she was on. She told me what the physical therapist had said about her recovery. She did all of this without even mentioning that there was a dozen taxidermied deer arranged around the house and that my father was sitting on the front porch with a rifle behind him. I went back outside to help my wife with the last of the bags. The deer in the yard still faced away from us, looking out to the trees. I walked out a ways, stopping at the 6-point buck at the edge of the driveway. It was clearly my father's work. I examined the details. The eye placement was a little too high. The line of the seam down the back of the neck was visible if you looked for it. The hooves had been set in some kind of dark resin that had been formed into rough blocks, painted to look like the ground. The whole thing was secured to the lawn by what looked to be rebar stakes through the resin blocks. I bent down and felt the back of it. The hide was, in fact, real. So was the fur. It had been done by hand and finished by hand and placed here on purpose. The next one over, the doe with one ear, had clearly been out in the weather longer. Its hide was sun-bleached in places, and there was moss starting on the resin at the base. I straightened up. My wife was standing at the back of the truck holding E's stuffed rabbit. She looked at me. "We're gonna have to talk about this," she said. "Yeah, I expected as much," I replied. She put her hands on her hips. "Right now. Not in the yard." The first night I asked my dad about the deer. We were on the porch after supper. My wife was inside helping Mom get ready for bed. The boys had eaten and gone upstairs to the spare bedroom to set up their plastic animals on the dresser. C had said about 6 words at dinner. E had said maybe a dozen, and most of them were about the deer in the yard. The dog, an old beagle named Patches, who had been my mother's idea 12 years ago, was lying on the porch by my dad's feet. "So, Dad," I sat down beside him. They didn't have a spare chair, so I just kneeled on the porch. "What's with all these deer out here?"
"Been working on them,"
was his simple answer. "Yeah, I can see that. But why?"
"Just something to do."
He cleared his throat. Sounded pretty gross. "But there's so many. What do you mean, something to do?"
"There's 14.
"Okay, 14. Why did you put 14 of them out here?" He cleared his throat again.
"Well, it just feels right with them around. I don't see what the issue is."
"Well, I've never seen anyone do something like this before. You used to put your mounts in the den." The old man shook his head at me.
"I changed my mind on where I want to put them."
"All of them? Outside and facing the woods?" He nodded. "Dad, that's not normal. What's going on?" He stopped and glared at me, but then his face looked more tired than irritated.
"I'm gonna ask you to leave that alone for tonight. You've been driving and your wife is tired, so are the boys. Your mother sure is glad to see you. We're not gonna talk about this anymore tonight."
And that was that, at least for now. "All right, Dad. Have a good night."
"You too. I'll be in a moment. Just gonna walk the property before bed."
He stood up and grabbed his rifle. "Oh, I can come with you if you want," I asked. He shook his head. "You sure?"
"Sure. Patches. Come on, boy."
The dog got up off the porch, stretching his obviously achy joints, and trotted down the steps. My dad walked down after him. He went around the side of the house to the right and disappeared past the corner. I watched, seeing if he would come back anytime soon, but he didn't, and I figured he'd gone all the way around to the back. I'd said goodnight, but I kind of wanted to sit on the porch a bit longer. The dark came in. I could hear my dad's footsteps somewhere off in the back of the property, the crunching of gravel and leaves in an old man's gate. He came back, but it took him 40 minutes. The dog came back up the steps first. My dad came up after him.
"I thought you went to bed."
"Dad, I just wanted to make sure you're okay."
"Oh, I'm fine, boy. Let's get on to bed."
So I went. My wife and I were in the small guest bedroom at the back of the house. The boys were in the larger spare across the hall. The bed was a double, smaller than what we had at home. My wife was lying on her side facing me. "So, did you figure out anything?" "He wouldn't answer any questions," I told her. "You had no idea about all these deer, huh?" I sighed. "No, I didn't. He's always mounted his own deer for a long time, but I didn't know he was sitting them in the yard. We've been on the phone almost every week. He's never said the word deer, I'm telling you." My wife rubbed her eyes. "And what's he doing with that rifle right next to him all the time?" I shrugged. "Did you ask about that?" "No, hon. He said he was walking the property and he took it with him when he did it. Maybe he just does his rounds throughout the day." "Rounds for what?" Her hand shot up with a demand for an answer. "Well, he didn't say that either." She was clearly agitated, and I couldn't blame her. My dad was being very suspicious. "I don't know if we can stay here," she said. "I'm not saying we go tonight. I'm saying I don't know if we can stay the whole 3 weeks, like we thought." She crossed her arms and lay in bed. I sat down next to her. "I don't blame you, to be honest. Just give me a while to figure out what's going on." "Okay, but try to do it quick. Your dad's freaking me out." I gave her a half smile. We went to sleep. I slept badly. I woke up around 3 with the feeling I'd heard something, so I went to the window to check. The window looked out the back of the house, across the backyard and toward the woods. There was mist coming up from the creek that ran along the back of the property. The moon was up and behind the clouds, and the light was diffuse. I could see the back fence and the tool shed, and those 2 deer that were placed near the tool shed. Seeing them again in the night out there made me worry. What was wrong with my dad? I stood at the window for a few minutes. The yard was so still and quiet. Eventually, I went back to bed. In the morning, I counted the deer again. There were 15 now. He'd added one. I walked the perimeter of the clearing to check. The new one was on the back side of the property, on the line between the backyard and the woods. It was a 4-point buck. The fur was clean and the eyes were set straight. The hide was tight on the form. It looked recent. The resin at the base was darker than the resin on the older ones. Newer. I walked over to the garage. My dad's garage is a detached building about 20 yards from the house. He built it himself in the 70s when I was a baby. It has 2 bays, the right one for the truck and the left one for his work. The work side had a long bench under the back window with shelves above it and a pegboard with his tools. The smell was the same smell I remembered from my childhood, sawdust and preservative, with a touch of machine oil on top. My dad was at the bench. He had a deer hide spread out in front of him. He was working on it with a fleshing knife. He had a respirator pushed up on his forehead, and he didn't look at me when I came in. "Hey, Dad, good morning. I noticed there was a new deer out by the tool shed." I brought it up immediately. "Mm-hmm." He focused on his work. "So, where did that one come from?" "Found it. Back of the property. Dead already." "Oh, Well, what killed it? No idea. You think someone shot it? No. Do you think an animal got it? Instantly, he set his knife down and stopped working on the hide. He looked out the back window of the garage, then to me. He looked stern. I'm gonna ask you again to leave this alone. I was about to speak, but he put his hand up. I know you got questions, and I don't have answers for you that are going to be satisfying. The questions you are asking me are not questions I'm going to answer this morning. Maybe at some point in the next few weeks I'll tell you something, since you're going to be here for some time. But not this morning. I've got to get this hide cleaned before the day warms up. I rolled my eyes. All right, Dad. I left the garage. By the end of the first weekend, I'd stopped asking my dad about the deer, and I began to watch them instead. I would count them when I could throughout the day. The count went up by 1 on Saturday night, and it went up 1 more on Monday night. By Tuesday morning, there were 18 deer. The new ones would appear usually in the morning, between the time my dad went to bed and by the time I got up to start the coffee. He went to bed around 11. I got up around 6. There was a window of about 7 hours in which a 4-point buck or an 8-point buck, or once a yearling doe, would arrive on the property and be in the backyard or beside the tool shed when I came out to look. I never once saw him place one. I never heard anything in the night either. The hides were always perfect. The eyes were always still bright. The bodies were always whole and unmarked, as if the animals had laid down on their own and let Dad take them. Our boys were acting different. E was outside most of the days. He had picked the new 4-point buck behind the tool shed as his favorite, and even named it Henry. He sat in the grass next to Henry and read out loud from his picture books. He told my wife at lunch one day that Henry liked the one about the monkey best. My wife told him it was sweet that he liked the deer, but that these deer were not toys, and that he should be respectful around his grandfather's stuff. E said he was respecting them, that they weren't toys, obviously. They were his friends. It sounds weird, but he would say it with the seriousness of a 7-year-old. So maybe it was just a kid thing, I thought. As for C, he was inside most of the time. He sat on the couch with his book or his handheld game, and he didn't want to go out. When my wife asked him if he wanted to walk down to the creek with her and E, he said no thanks. When I asked him to come help me carry the recycling out to the bin, he came out, but he kept his eyes on the ground the whole time, walking fast, and was back inside as soon as the bin lid closed. I asked him at dinner on Monday if he was feeling okay. He said he was fine. He didn't look at me, though, when he said that. Hey, bud, you sure? I placed a hand on his shoulder. He smirked and nodded his head. I'm sure, Dad. Are you sleeping okay? I know it's hard to sleep at a new place. He nodded again. You can tell me if something is bothering you, okay? I'm okay, Dad, he said. I let it go. My wife caught my eye across the table. My dad was eating his pork chop and didn't look up. That Tuesday night, C had a bad dream, and he came into our room around midnight. He stood in the doorway in his pajamas, and my wife sat up, saying, "Come here, baby." He came over. He sat on the edge of the bed, and my wife put her arm around him. Was it a bad dream? Tell me what it was about. He stared at the floor, and he said something really creepy that I tried not to take too serious. There was a man in the woods. A tall man. Tall like how, honey? Tall like a tree? My wife looked at me over his head. Well, what was this tall man doing? He was looking at me. From where? From past the deer. He was past the deer in the yard. He was just standing there. The deer were between him and me. Was he doing anything else?
No, he was just looking. But I could feel him looking, even before I saw him. I knew somebody was looking, and then I looked and he was there. My wife pulled him closer, rubbing his back. It was just a dream, baby. He nestled his head into her chest. I know, Mom. You want to sleep with us tonight? Can I? They both looked at me. With a grin, I nodded. He climbed into bed between us. He went to sleep faster than I expected. I lay there in the dark for an hour after that, listening to him breathe, and listening to this house, and of course, making sure I heard any noise that might come from outside. The mist had come up from the creek again. I could see it through the curtain when I turned my head. I went out on the porch around 2 a.m. My dad was already there. He had the rifle across his lap now. He rocked in his rocker like usual, not looking at me when I came out. I asked him how long he'd been out here so far. He just gave me basic answers like, a while. Said that nothing's happened so far, even though I'm not sure what something might be. And when I asked what he was doing, he just said, same thing I do every night, son. When I asked what that was, he just rocked. I sat down on the porch step. The dog came out from somewhere and lay down next to me with his head on my thigh. The moon was up and the mist was up again, and I could see the front yard pretty clear. The deer were in their places. The closest one was the original 6-point at the edge of the driveway. The one past it was a doe with a missing ear. Past that, the yard sloped down a little, and the deer at the edge of the yard were partly hidden in the mist. I sat there with my dad watching the yard. The mist moved a little, slowly, with no wind to really push it, from what I could tell. And it was around then that I saw movement behind the deer. It was past the yard in the trees at the edge of the woods where the property line was. It wasn't an animal moving through the trees, but something the height of those trees, or close to it, moving between them. I saw the shape of it go behind one trunk, then come out on the other side. The shape was the shape of a man, except twice as tall as a man. It did not come out into the yard, but it stayed in the trees. I lost it in the mist after a few moments. Immediately, I looked back to my dad. He was watching the same direction I'd been watching. He gripped the rifle in both hands hard, but he was not yet pointing it. He was just holding it across his lap with both hands tightly. You saw that, right? I asked him. He nodded, then said, "Go inside." When I tried to speak up, he shook his head at me and said more sternly, "Go inside now." The way he commanded me then made me feel like a kid. I listened. I went inside and I lay next to my wife and C, who was still asleep. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I lay there and I went over what I'd seen. That shape and the height of it. What in the world was that? A weird trick of the light and shadows? In the morning, my wife was up before me. She had C in the kitchen eating cereal, and E was outside, of course. My dad was in the garage again. Mom was in her bed with her physical therapist, who came 3 mornings a week. My wife sat down next to me at the kitchen table after she had cleared C's bowl. "Tell me what happened last night. You're acting weird." I told her, and I didn't leave anything out. I said exactly what I'd seen, and how oddly it resembled C's dream. Her eyes were wide and drifted off for a few seconds before she replied, "I think we need to leave." "I know," I told her. "How fast can we leave?" "Well, let me talk to my dad." "Today," she said. Today, I got it." I went out to the garage after the physical therapist left. My dad was at the bench. He was stretching a new hide over a form. He had the respirator down around his neck. "Dad, I need you to tell me what you saw last night. What I saw," I demanded from him. He set the hide down and turned toward me. "Son, I don't know what it is. I've never known. I've had a 1.5 years to figure it out, and I haven't. so I'm not holding anything back from you, I promise. I just don't know." "What are you talking about? What happened a year and a half ago?" I asked. "That's when it started. I came home from hunting and there was a deer in the yard, the front yard. A dead buck, but there was no mark on it that I could find. I called old Mason up the road. He came over and looked at it with me, and we couldn't figure out what had killed it. He thought maybe it had a heart attack. Deer do have heart attacks sometimes." I said sure. I put it in the bed of the truck and took it to the garage, and I dressed it out. A week later, there was another one, same as the first, dead and no markings. I called Mason again, and Mason did not come this time. I think he'd decided he didn't want to know what was going on, so I dressed that one too. The next time, it was a week after that. Then it was every couple of days. Then they started coming faster than I could process them. I had to start preserving them whole, since I didn't have the freezer space for the meat and I wasn't going to leave them to rot. After the third one I found, I saw it. I was out on the porch one night with a flashlight, trying to see if I could see what was bringing these dead deer here. I saw it at the edge of the trees for about 10 seconds. It was tall enough that I knew I was looking at something I didn't have a name for, and I could feel it watching me. I thought of C's dream then, and I tried not to let my dad see that I had shuddered. After it left, I didn't go inside for a couple of hours, since I didn't feel like I could move yet. It was such a strange sensation. When I did go inside, I told your mother. She believed me, but she didn't see it that night. However, she has seen it before. I didn't know what to say. "What is it? How often does it come here?" "I've seen it every night for the last 12 months now." He looked down at his feet. "Every night," I muttered. "Yes, every night. Sometimes for a long time, sometimes for just a few seconds. Sometimes it stays in the trees, and other times it comes out into the yard a little ways. It has never come up to the house, though. The deer in the yard are between it and the house, and it has never come past any of the deer in the yard." Are you saying the deer keep it out?" "I'm saying it has never come past the deer in the yard. I do not know what is keeping it out. I have a theory, but I'm not sure." "What's the theory, Dad? This sounds insane and serious." I was starting to grind my teeth from stress. "It leaves me the deer. I do what is to be done with the deer, and I put the deer in the yard. The deer stays in the yard, it stays in the trees. We have a kind of arrangement, even if neither of us has spoken about it out loud, since I cannot speak to it, and I don't even know if it can speak. I'll tell you one more thing. Then I'm gonna need to get back to this hide. There was a stretch in February when it did not bring a deer for 9 days. I don't know why. I had run out of work to do, so I cleaned up my garage and I sharpened my knives. I waited. On the 6th night, I saw it standing in the front yard. Not in the trees, but in the yard, about 40 feet from the porch. It stood there for about an hour. I sat on the porch with the rifle and I watched it, watching me. After an hour, it went back into the trees. The next morning, there was a deer behind the well house. I do not know what was different about those 9 days. I do not know what brought it closer or what put it back. I've stopped trying to figure out what makes it do what it does, and I just do the work it leaves. Dad, this sounds crazy.
I would be sitting here calling you crazy if I hadn't seen it myself. C has been having dreams about it." My dad looked worried then, but I continued. "My wife wants to leave today." "You should leave today. I've been waiting on you to say that, to be honest." "You should leave too, with Mom." "I'm not gonna leave. This is my house. Your mother's in this house. I'm not gonna leave my house since something has set up shop in the trees. I'm gonna do what I've been doing. If I have to do it for another year, I'll do it for another year. If I have to do it for 10 years, I'll do it for 10. "What does Mom think about this?" I asked. "As I said, your mother has since seen it at least once. Your mother knows about it, has known it for at least a year. Your mother and I have talked about this between ourselves and we've made our decisions." "You should have told me before I came out here." "I should have. I really should have, and I'm sorry I didn't." "I'm gonna pack up my family and leave as soon as possible," I said. He nodded. "I can call Aunt Janet about coming up to help Mom for a couple of weeks, until my sister gets here." "Okay." He just kept nodding. "Dad, what if it comes inside? What even are your plans for all of this?" "It hasn't come inside yet." "I know it hasn't, but what if?" "I couldn't tell you." I squeezed my eyes shut, then turned around and headed back to the house. I told my wife about the conversation, and we began to pack the boys' bags. We had been there for 4 days. I went to my mom's room. She had her glasses off and a book in her lap. "He's told you everything, hasn't he?" she said, seeing the look on my face. "Yep." "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't either of you tell me?" She closed her book. "You should come with us, Mom. I don't want you or Dad to be here." "I can't. You know I can't do stairs right now, and you don't have a downstairs bedroom. I'm not gonna be hauled around like a sack of potatoes. And your father's not gonna leave no matter what I say. I'm not gonna leave without him either. So that's the end of that." "Okay." I paced around the room. "Well, Aunt Janet's gonna come up, cover our weeks before my sister gets here." "That's fine. I'll see Janet then." "Go on. Take your boys home. And your wife." I hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. My dad helped me carry our bags down to the truck. He didn't say much. The boys were already in there, and my wife was up at the porch saying goodbye to Mom through the open front door. Since we decided not to have the boys come in for a second goodbye, because that would set E off. The screen door was propped open with one of the rubber wedges my dad had been using for the screens. He put the last bag in the bed of the truck, and he stood there with his hand on the tailgate. "I'll call you when I get home," I told him. "If you ever change your mind about staying, the spare bedroom is yours." "I know that, and thank you, but I think we have to go." "Well, y'all take care. Sorry, son." "It's all right, Dad. Love you." He pulled me into a hug. My wife came down the steps past him and got in the truck. I got in too. I backed out of the driveway and turned the truck around in front of the house. The deer in the yard were in their places still. My dad was on the porch in his rocker then. He started to cry when we got to the end of the driveway. He wanted to bring Henry home with us. I told him Henry had to stay with Granddad. He kept crying for 20 minutes after we got on the gravel road. By the time we hit the state highway, he was quiet, looking out the back window. C sat in the front passenger seat next to me. My wife was in the back with E. Suddenly, my wife asked the boys if they wanted to stop at Wendy's. So we stopped at Wendy's, and the boys ate, and we drove on. We got home around 8 that night. I carried E up to bed, since he had fallen asleep in the car. C went up by himself. He hugged me at the bottom of the stairs first, which he hadn't done in over a year. I held on to him for a few seconds. I enjoyed that. Then he went up. My wife and I sat in the kitchen, not saying much. but we had a glass of wine each. She went to bed before I did. I sat at the kitchen table for another hour, then called my dad. I told him we were home. He was happy about that, and said that Mom was sleeping at the moment. I let him know I'd call him tomorrow, told him to be careful. As promised, Aunt Janet came up that next week. She's my mother's younger sister, 65 and divorced, and retired. She stayed for 10 days. After that, my sister finally arrived, and she was there for the rest of my mom's recovery. My mother was back on her feet by the middle of the summer. She used a cane for another couple of months. By fall, she was walking the property without any help. I called my dad every week. He didn't bring up the deer, and neither did I. We talked about my mom's recovery and my work and the boys. I asked him after about a month if he was still doing the same thing, and he told me yes. I asked him if it was the same as before. He said it was. And I asked if he'd been sleeping okay, or at all. And of course, it was the usual. And that's where I left it. I didn't go back up there. My wife didn't want to go, and she didn't want me to take the boys anymore. We talked about having Mom and Dad come down for a long weekend once Mom was strong enough to make the trip. But my mom didn't want to leave the house for that long, and Dad would not leave it at all. So we kept it over the phone. C was different that summer and into the fall. He slept with his door open and the hallway light on. He didn't want to be alone in the basement to do laundry. He was sleeping with the door closed again by the middle of fall. He never asked me about the tall man, and I think he made a decision at some point that he was never going to ask, that he wanted to try to forget it. E took longer. He talked about the deer for weeks after we got home, then about Henry the deer specifically. Henry liked the picture book about the monkey. Henry liked the song E's first grade class had learned about a frog. Henry was a good listener. My wife told him gently after a while that Henry was at Granddad's house, and he could think about him, but he had to do his other things. E said okay, but I'm not sure we got through to him. He drew Henry at school. He drew Henry standing in our backyard, even though Henry had never been in our backyard. He drew an outline around Henry that was the shape of a person who was bigger than the deer, as if the person was made of mist or air. His teacher called my wife about these drawings, and my wife told her E had been at the grandfather's house and his grandfather did taxidermy, that we thought this was his way of processing it. The teacher bought that. I say bought, but really a lot of that is true. About 3 months after we got home, he said something weird, something that worried me. It came out of nowhere. I think it would be nice not to have any insides, like Grandpa's deer, like Henry. My wife and I both stopped eating. Buddy? I said. Why would you think that would be nice? 'Cause then you don't have to be scared of anything getting at your insides. I gulped. E, nothing's gonna be getting at your insides, son. I just think it would be nice, he smiled. I'm not saying I want it. I'm just saying it would be nice. My wife asked him if anything was making him scared lately, and he said no. She asked if anything was making him think about these insides, and that was a no as well. He went back to his spaghetti, and he didn't bring it up again. Not that I know of. One evening, I got home after 6. My wife had made meatloaf. The boys had already eaten. C was in his room with his books, and E had asked if he could play in the backyard for a while, before his bath. My wife told him yes. It was already dark by then, but our backyard was inside the porch light, and Eli was a kid who liked being outside. We'd been letting him have his half hour before bed since we got home. My wife called him in for his bath around 7:30, but he didn't come. She called again, then she went to the back door and called him from there. He still didn't come. Aggravated, I got up from the couch. I don't like it when the boys disobey their mother. I went to the back door. E was standing in the middle of the backyard with his back to me. He was facing the line of trees that separates our property from the property behind ours. and he wasn't moving. "E, you okay, bud? Mom said to come inside." "Yeah, Dad," he said without looking at me. "I'm coming." But he didn't move. "Right now, E, okay?" "I'm coming," he said. He stood there for another few seconds. Then he turned and walked toward me. He was a small shape inside the circle of the porch light. He came up the steps, and he looked up at me as he walked past into the kitchen. "Henry's home," he said. "What?" I went out into the yard. I was flabbergasted. The deer was at the back edge of our lawn, where the grass ends and the tree line starts. It was facing the house. It was Henry, sure enough, just as I'd remembered him from Dad's house. And now his resin block at the hooves was anchored into our lawn, using the same rebar stakes that I'd seen at my dad's. I walked up to it, and I stood in front of it. This was brought here, and placed here. It was facing the back door of my house, and there was only one person that could do this. I walked around the side of the house. There was a mount in the side yard, too, between our house and the chain link fence that separates our property from the neighbors. This one was a doe, also facing the house. Then I walked around to the front. Another one in the front yard near the mailbox, also facing the house, and another one at the corner of the lawn near the driveway, facing our house. I walked the entire perimeter. There were 6 in total, placed roughly evenly around our quarter-acre lot. 2 in back, 1 on each side, and 2 in the front. Every one of them was anchored in the lawn, with the same resin and the same stakes, all facing towards our home. I went back inside. My wife was at the sink rinsing E's spaghetti plate from earlier. He'd eaten after going back in. I must have been out there for about 20 minutes. "Hey, babe, are you okay?" "I think we need to take the boys upstairs," I told her. She looked at me with an eyebrow raised, but she didn't ask a question. She dried her hands in a hurry and went to the foot of the stairs, calling for C. C came down. She put her hand on his shoulder and steered him back up the stairs. Then she picked up E, who was sitting on the kitchen floor with one of his plastic horses, and carried him up after C. I went to the kitchen phone and called my dad. "Dad, what in the world?" I said as soon as I heard him pick up.
"What's wrong?"
"Your mounted deer appeared in my yard. Did you do this?" Immediately, he sounded very concerned.
"Son, I haven't moved any mounts off my property. Are they facing toward the road?"
No, Dad, they're facing toward the house." I could hear him swallow deeply from the other end of the phone.
"Listen to me, very carefully. You need to turn those deer around. Right now, as fast as you can, do you understand?"
"I hear you." I heard my wife make a sound at the top of the stairs. It wasn't a scream, but it was almost one. The boys were behind her. She pointed to the street. I looked outside. I could barely breathe. "Dad, there is no street. I'm looking out the window right now. There is no street anymore. No neighbor's house, nothing out there beyond the yard."
"Okay, I'm getting the truck right now. I'll be there in an hour. Do not go outside."
He hung up. Oh God, I thought. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time. My wife was at the top with E on her hip and C behind her. C had his hand on the back of her sweater. He wasn't looking at anything. His face looked like it had gone slack. I called them downstairs to the living room. They came. E was wriggling around and asking to be put down. He was saying he had to go back outside, saying he had to see Henry. My wife was holding him with both arms, saying no, he could not do that. We got them both to the living room couch. My wife sat down with them. E was crying and twisting, and C was sitting next to her, so motionless and emotionless. It was then that a long, low moaning sound came from outside, like a sick and dying cow. It came from somewhere out past the back of the house. It went on for about 5 seconds and stopped abruptly. A moment later, another moan came, this one out past the front of the house. deeper than before. A third one came after. None of them sounded like the same animal as the others. They all sounded different, like various animals in different stages of torment. C let go of his mother then. He slid sideways off the couch and onto the rug on the floor. I expected to see him catch himself, but his shoulder hit first and then his head, gently. His eyes were closed. "See?" I ran over to him and turned him over. He was breathing, thankfully, but his eyes remained closed. I shook his shoulder and said his name, but I could get no response from the boy. I then checked his pulse to be sure. It was fine. I picked him up and put him back on the couch beside his mother. She had E pinned to her with one arm. With the other, she held C's head against her shoulder. Then the house began to fill with mist. The mist was coming in from the bottom of the back door. I saw it from the living room through the doorway in the kitchen. It was thin. It curled up off the linoleum and crept across the kitchen floor toward us in a slow line. I went to the bathroom and got the bath mat. I rolled it and jammed it against the bottom of the back door. I then went to the front door and did the same with the rug from the entryway. The mist that was already inside did not retreat. It stayed where it was, low and slow, an inch off the floor. E had stopped crying. He was looking at the back door from his mother's lap. His face had a calmness to it, and I did not like that. "Mommy, Henry's at the back door," he said, oddly delighted. No, you stay right here with me, okay?" she told him. "He's at the back door waiting for me." She had to wrestle him a bit to keep him from going. "You're staying right here." "Mommy?" "No, stay." The moans were constant now. They were coming from every direction around the house and did not let up. There was always at least one of them going. Sometimes two of them overlapped. These random animalistic sounds. I went over to the front window. I saw it there, standing at the edge of our yard. It was the shape I'd seen at the edge of my father's trees, except now it had nothing to compare itself to. There was no forest out here. It was just a shape in the absence past where the yard ended. It was taller than the streetlights would be on a normal night. It was the height of the second story of a house. It was facing us. After a few seconds, it took a step. It came onto our lawn. I went to the side window in the dining room. There was a shape there too, at the side edge of the yard. It was stepping onto the lawn at the same time. I went to the back window. There was a shape at the back edge of the yard too. I don't know if it was the same shape in 3 places at once, or 3 different shapes. Don't know why I bothered. This thing made no sense. E was off his mother's lap suddenly, running across the kitchen toward the back door. "E!" he kept going. "E, stop!" I called to him. He had his hand on the doorknob, and he was turning it. I got to him in a heartbeat and pulled him off the door. The door came open about an inch as I pulled him off. Mist flooded in through that inch, and the second the door was open, this mist was so much thicker, and it brought with it a sort of smell, a smell like dead animal. I shut the door quickly and threw my weight against it. I got E under my left arm, and he was screaming and fighting me. Screaming for Henry, saying over and over that Henry was at the door waiting, and we were being rude not to let him in. The figure at the front window was halfway across the front yard now. I could see it through the living room window from where I was holding the back door shut. It was walking at a steady and calm pace. No hurry, whatever it was. The mist was now up to my knees. Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't know what to do. That was when the figure at the front of the house stopped, right at our front porch. It leaned over, and it put its face to the front window. I turned away. I did not want to look at that face. I had my back to the window, and I had E under my arm, the back door at my shoulders. I saw the bottom of the thing's figure framed in the front window when I looked. That had to be its legs. The legs were man-like, but stretched. The skin looked gray and wet, and the feet were bare and stretched too. I'm so glad I never saw that face. It continued to bend down, putting its face level with the window perfectly, and I kept looking at the floor. I heard it tap at the window then, so it had fingers, I assumed, but I did not look. The thing tapped 3 times. Was that its way of knocking? Another form was at the back door too. I could feel it through the door against my back, a pressure on the door. Light, but present. Not yet pushing. I doubted I could overpower something like that. The moaning was at a fever pitch. My wife was screaming. C was unconscious. E was screaming at me to let him go outside to Henry. And I think I was shouting, but I couldn't hear myself anymore. All at once, sunlight broke through the windows, and all the noises stopped. I looked up. I could see through the window and past the yard. No more void. It wasn't even night anymore. "What just happened?" my wife asked from the other room. I could barely answer. I don't know." We stayed where we were for several minutes. There was no telling what was going on. Was it getting better? Getting worse? Was it a trick? I carried E to the couch and laid him next to his mother. He wasn't frantic anymore all of a sudden. Whatever had possessed him was gone, and he looked confused, even scared. I went to the front door then. I pulled the rug away from the bottom of the door, and I opened it. There I saw my dad's truck in the driveway. It was parked at a weird angle, as if he had stopped in a hurry. The front tire was up on the lawn, the driver's side door standing open still. I could see from there even, the keys were in the ignition, and the dome light was on, dim in the morning sun. In the passenger seat was his John Deere hat. Henry, the deer, was beside the truck. Henry was now facing the other way, facing out toward the street. The resin block at his feet had been pulled out of the ground and reset. The grass around the block was disturbed and torn. Whoever had done it in a hurry. I walked around the house. The other 5 mounts were still facing the house, still facing us. It was only Henry that had been turned. Henry, who was by my father's abandoned truck. I could breathe again. The street was back, the neighbors' houses were back, the sun was here. The only thing that wasn't here and back to normal was my dad. The police were called, and I called my mother, pleading that he was somehow there, that maybe his truck had made it here on its own accord. But no, he had done what he said he would do. She said that he had driven down in the night. She knew that we were in danger, but she didn't know the exact situation. And I told her the truth, that his truck was here, but he was not. Before the police arrived, I went back outside and pulled the rebar stakes out of every resin block, dragging those 6 mounts into the garage, one at a time. I put them under tarps in the back. When the police arrived, it was something that I did not want to talk about or explain. I went back out then and stamped the displaced ground flat with my boot. Then I went back in, and I sat with my family until the officer arrived. We could not speak of the events, obviously, but we told him that Dad had driven down here, and yet we couldn't find him. The officer asked about any memory issues, how mentally aged he was. But I told him the truth. My dad was healthy, stable. The officer went out to the truck then and examined it for a while. The authorities searched for my dad. Dogs and people of all sorts scoured the surrounding blocks and my yard. Divers in the nearby creek searched too. Apparently, state troopers went to my mom's house and searched all around there too. For a while, his picture was in the news, but he was never found. Not even a body. The only traces were by where Henry stood. Desperate, pushed-in footsteps, like a man trying to pry and turn a statue. Not long after this, my mother moved into an assisted living place in town. She didn't want to be in the house anymore, and she didn't like being alone. We had a memorial for my dad about a year after he was officially declared missing. The best we could do was bury an empty box in the cemetery beside his parents. The county sheriff came to the service, standing at the back of the chapel, but he didn't say a word to me afterward. Mom went on for another 2 years in that assisted living place, but she would die of a stroke. She had been sharp up to the day she went, and we talked on the phone every week. The topic of Dad and those deers was very clearly avoided. The one time the conversation veered was about a month before she died. I went to visit her in person, and out of nowhere she said, "You know, your father did what he had to do." I know, Mom. He was a very tired man. All the things he had to do at our house, he didn't want to do any of it. But he did it for us, because he had to. That's the type of man he always was. Did what he had to do. I bet you if you were here, he would do it again in a heartbeat. I hugged my mother tightly, and I tried not to sound like I was crying, despite the tears. Mom never mentioned what happened to the deer in the yard. The last time I went to their house after Mom passed to check out the property and her belongings, the deer were gone, and at every spot they had been standing, there wasn't even a mark in the ground. I hope whenever the worst happens, if it happens, I can be that kind of dad, ready to lay down my life, meet my fate, for the sake of my children and family. This was a terrifying story, leaving a lot of questions to be answered. But at least there's some light knowing that true good exists. Good night. This has been Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. You can find me on X at Dark Prevails, and you can send me your true stories of the unexplained at darkstories.org. Support what I do and unlock tons of extra narrations and stories read by me. Head over to eerie.fm, that's EERIE.fm, and become a premium member. We can't keep going depending on platforms like YouTube, who might pay us 1 month, then not the next. So we need your help. We need as many people as possible to become premium members, so that we can be independent and create even more amazingly terrifying content for you. Plus, you get a ton of bonus goodies and more new bonuses every week for members only. Head to eerie.fm. You can go there for free too, and enjoy every EerieCast show in one spot. Thank you. Until next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.